Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and we're going to be going over the Thursday night football slate between the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles. The game is 48.5 over under, which I actually kind of find low, but we'll talk about that. And then Philly is a minus 3.5 at home in this game. I think that this is actually a really fun slate. There's a lot of really solid pricing on this slate, making it hard and easy at the same time to kind of find what you want to do. But paying up top and getting the guys you want is probably the most important thing.
I am so excited to watch this game.
Yes.
This is not a game that the NFL script writers thought would be the game of the week or a contender for, Thursday night game of the year. And we've had some bangers in recent weeks. Obviously, last week, Cincinnati and Baltimore came through once again. It was so fun to watch. And, we did well on our last Showdown slate. Both of our props of the night hit. It was very fun game to watch. But this one in particular, this is for the division lead. Huge tiebreaker implications. And this is kind of one of those Washington. You've dominated bad teams.
Yeah.
Against good teams, you're 1-3 against teams with winning records. So this is like a huge case of where are you really at? Are you really here to overtake and be a contender, or are you just this is a good story and then kind of fall out, so to speak?
Right,
it's
for
really
sure.
exciting to see.
I did want to say it actually went up to 49.5, so at least we're getting some more points coming in. Right now,
that's the second highest total, or the highest total on the entire weekend.
The whole slate.
Tied with Seattle and San Francisco.
Gotcha.
Which is another rivalry game.
Yeah, the Eagles are at 58.4% chance in the matchup predictor by ESPN. Lots of fun stuff though going on. Let me pull up the slate itself, and we'll get talking about it. We'll start on the away team side, which is going to be the Washington Commanders. There we go. Going up, just looking up top. Let's go to flex real quick. But looking up top, there are two guys that just kind of stand apart from everybody else here. Jaden Daniels and his favorite receiver, Terry McLaurin. And then you get the running back duo, which we do not have a true lean, I don't believe, on Brian Robinson Jr.
He personally has said that he has a legit chance to, or he feels great about playing. But we've seen time and time again this year, don't trust a player's words.
Right.
But it is encouraging that both of these practices, which Monday is always an estimation because it's a walkthrough, and then Tuesday is very limited as well. But he participated. He wasn't DNP. Just as an example, Marshawn Lattimore, who has yet to debut since he was traded to the Commanders, was a DNP both days. If you want any indication of how one's landing versus the other, tough matchup though against Philly. They've been top two across the board this entire season against running backs, top 5 in points scoring. Only 2 touchdowns allowed to running backs in general this season, tied for the best in the NFL. So it doesn't matter whether Brian Robinson plays or not. It is going to be a high volume to get there with the touchdown or two.
Yeah.
Not just going for 100 yards and a score like Brian Robinson we've seen a couple times this season.
Eckler in the same position, obviously. If Brian Robinson is out, we'll talk about Eckler in a minute, but just he's been out these last few weeks, and you can see the scores that Eckler's putting up. Just wanted to talk about him because he has been good when he has time. He's not very efficient, though, as you can see. 3.4, 3.8. Not
exactly.
Yeah.
And then Pittsburgh was a tough matchup. We ended up playing him because of we thought he would have passing volume, and lo and behold, he didn't have that much passing volume. He only had 2 targets. But he scored twice, and that's why he ended up, returning value at 5,900, I believe, is what he was on the main slate.
Yeah, I believe so.
So 8,000 is a steep price, even if Brian Robinson is hypothetically out, to invest in because there's a lot of sexy names up top that you want to fit in.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just an awkward price range. We'll talk about a fade. I guess I kind of, if you want to do context clues, you kind of have an idea of who I'm leaning against in this matchup. But that's kind of. He's performed well from a fantasy perspective in Brian Robinson's absence, but it's a tall task ahead against Philly this week.
Yep, and then let's go talk about some pass catchers because truly there's about 6 that you can talk about with this Washington Commanders team, and no one is comfortable, if that makes sense. Like, you look at all these guys up here, the only ones that I'm like, oh yeah, let me really get pieces of this offense is Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin has been by far the best player on this team. It took him a second to get used to, get used to Jaden Daniels, as you can see about these first 2 games. But then since then, I mean,
It's 6 straight games over 15.9.
yeah,
15.8 is his worst game in the last 7 or
right.
6. Yeah, that's as good as you want from a wide receiver one. Typically, historically, there's not really a great correlation with a wide receiver fantasy or a wide receiver one in fantasy
Right.
with a rookie quarterback, especially a running style quarterback. But I mean, he is well on his way to being that, especially with all the injuries you see with everybody. He's been incredible. He's killed it. If you're a best ball, has some ownership in him. We were a little underweight to the field, which is a little disappointing, but and it's all on low volume. I mean, that's a lot of 6 or less target games in those productive games. There's multi-touchdown games, but only 2 games he had above 8 or more targets. Everything else is 7 or less. So that's usually kind of a good sign, but it's also kind of a volatile sign because usually those kind of average out to where you'll start having some duds if you're not going to be punching one into the end zone or having those deep balls like he's been having success with.
Yeah, and he had the 2 touchdowns in the game against the Giants, which saved his day, basically. Got him this 15.9 that we just talked about. But yeah, Terry McLaurin, the first guy off the board for the Washington Commanders, in my opinion. And then the next highest priced guy is Noah Brown. Noah Brown has actually been really, really getting the targets these last few weeks, 6 and 7 these last 3 weeks. That's a telling sign that he is the next guy up. And truly, we missed out on him a little bit in best ball because, he wasn't really he was still with Houston for the.
He was traded to them
at the
towards the
beginning
end of the preseason because
right.
Their wide receiver 7 was John Mechie, who
Yeah.
just went off on the Showdown slate. So they were deep as can be. At this point, if you would have thought all these injuries would have happened with Houston, they would have wished they kept him. But yeah, he's been doing really well. He was the guy who caught the Hail Mary. But what's telling is that not only is it getting the consistent wide receiver 2 volume, he hit a career or season high, rather, 89% of the snaps, which, they've been waiting to see which of these guys is going to get the bulk of the snaps. And he was basically getting the wide receiver 2, but it was hovering around mid to high 60s.
Yeah.
But 2 of the last 3 weeks have been above 80. I don't know what happened in week 9. I know they were ahead a ton. It was a close game against the Giants. I don't know why he only played 50% of the snaps, but 89% this past week. 4 of the last 5 games, over 6 targets. He's got a touchdown, obviously the game winner in there. But yeah, pretty interesting, tournament-esque play this week because he's the only really guy in that middle price range, other than Dallas Goedert, who is currently questionable.
And then Zach Ertz, we'll be talking about real quick. He's been really good. He's just a guy that gets out there, finds he's a good post up basketball player in my opinion.
Right.
He finds the zone, he sits in it, he moves really well for quarterbacks, always looking at keeping his eyes on them, and it finds a way to get open in place in very small areas, and that's why he's on this list and why he's 5,600, and actually his price is pretty solid for his volume, in my opinion.
His style of play is exactly why he's able to play to being age 34
right.
as a tight end, despite coming off an ACL injury, missing a ton of last year. That was a late season injury in 2022. He just, like you said, not overly athletic, not going to wow you, but he just finds space. He's like a Jason Witten-esque tight end. And so those are always, a good benefit to have. Again, early in the season, we thought Ben Sinnott, which was one of our favorite tight ends in the class, was going to eventually overtake and just get the bulk of the snaps and workload. That has not happened.
Mm-hmm.
He's played above, 60-70% most of the season. A couple of where he's kind of flirting with John Bates, kind of even snaps, but John Bates is more of the blocking tight end and doing 2 tight end sets. And Ben Sinnott hasn't really overtaken him in any way. So very interesting, but it is worth noting Ben Sinnott right now, according to RotoWire, highest value on the slate.
Yeah.
Just because he's minimum price and he's projected for a point.
Yes.
You know how valued those are, especially when you have slates like these where it's just, you got Saquon, you got 2 sexy quarterbacks,
exactly.
2 wide receiver ones, and trying to fit 4 or even 5 of those guys. That's how you do it.
I was going to say also, we know that Zach Ertz is a rookie tight end killer. Ask Trey McBride, who's been pretty solid for the Arizona Cardinals. Before he got his breakout chance, Zach Ertz was actually playing above him. So we're hoping that, Ben Sinnott will have his breakout game. Next up, though, we will talk about these 3 guys down here at the bottom prices: Luke McCaffrey, Zacchaeus, and De'Ami Brown. Those three are going to be really hard to figure out who we want to play because they are the fourth option in this offense, but somebody will probably catch the ball.
Yeah, they've done a 3-man weave essentially of who has the third most snaps as a wide receiver. Luke McCaffrey's done it a couple times, then De'Ami Brown did it a couple weeks in a row, and then Zacchaeus did it a couple weeks as well. I don't know. Projections like Zacchaeus probably the most.
Yeah.
But he's also the most expensive. So that doesn't necessarily mean he's the best value
Right.
of those three. It's kind of hard to trust any of those, but that's why they're that cheap, and you're just waiting for a less than 10%er to work out. And we've actually, more often than not, on Showdown slates this year have done well on those kinds of calls.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting to see when we do our first builds if you are willing to invest in any of those guys, or if we're just kind of going to go heavy Eagles or a more balanced line. You know, there's a lot of ways to go in this slate for sure.
Yeah. But let's go over to the Eagles side of the ball. We'll talk about kickers and defense together in a second. But looking at the Eagles, you can see the price. Oh, well, yeah, you can definitely tell they're high there. You can see the prices now as 11,000 for Jalen Hurts, the highest on the whole slate. Saquon's actually the second highest, also right in front of Jaden Daniels, and then AJ Brown. All three of them above 10,000. Then you drop down to Devontae Smith, who is the Q tag, but it's very interesting trying to get as many of these high price guys as possible, which ones you want, and then also pairing them with those cheap guys we kind of talked about for Washington. That's actually where you're going to find most of that value, I think.
Yeah, with Jalen Hurts, him as a fantasy player has really started hitting the stride of late. I believe he has 8 rushing touchdowns in his last 4 games. He's hit 30 points basically in 3 straight games, and then really value. Washington's actually been that was a secondary over the last 2 years. We've just like whoever's playing Washington, play a receiver or two, or that's the double stack that we're targeting. That hasn't been the case this year, and that's including them playing from ahead. So they've been really impressive scheme wise. It's not like there's been much of a personnel change. Obviously, they did trade for Marshawn Lattimore, but he hasn't even played for them, and they're still top 5 against the pass this year. So. But that's not how Jalen Hurts gets his money. It's 1-yard touchdowns. I saw a stat today that Saquon Barkley has been tackled at the 2 or 1 yard line 10 times this season and has only touched the ball the rest of the possession 3 times.
That's awesome.
So most of that is because they just say, hey, put your right foot back. Dallas Goedert, Grant Calcaterra, get right behind him and push his ass into the end zone just like we know and love how to do it.
Yep.
I don't see anything different this week. It's kind of scary from a prop perspective because he's in this 5-game win streak they've had since the bye. Not once did he go over 25 passing attempts.
Right.
So all of this is deep ball, and you see and on top of that, with the 25 pass attempts, you got a 10 completion game, you got a 14, 16, 16, 18 completions. He's not really doing it through the air, which is scary because usually you like to do double stacks with high volume passing offenses, and that's not something you can do with him. It's really tough to trust, but on a showdown slate like this, not really as concerning to do a double or even a single for that matter. He's in a great spot.
And then talking about Saquon Barkley, let's just run through the running back on this team. Inconsistent attempts. We looked at his line. I believe it's 18.5. I thought the unders actually sounded better in my personal opinion. But he does a lot with those attempts. As you can tell, he's more efficient than the other side of the ball, 10.4. 4.9 is okay. 4.7 is okay. But 5.9, he's got 22.4 fantasy points this year. 8 touchdowns. He's just been really good, and his new team loves him. They love him in Philly. So
he's been an interesting one. Basically, he's been like Derrick Henry, for example. Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson versus Saquon and Jalen Hurts. I don't know, in your opinion, if there's one that you're more surprised of the success between the two. Obviously, Saquon has been the high-low guy.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry has just as much, upside, obviously, but Saquon's got multiple 35-plus point games, but he's also got multiple games where he's under 15. But 36, 36, 36. 3 games of that, but also 4 games 15 or under.
Right.
So Derrick Henry has been the 22, 23 every single week with Lamar doing well as well.
Yes.
Saquon, it was just kind of one of the things that we were concerned about was why Jalen Hurts has done so well in recent weeks is get down to 1, just push him in, and that just really caps the upside. Saquon's thriving despite that. It's the year of the resurgence at running back from a fantasy perspective. But yeah, he's done really well in a good spot this week as a home favorite, $5 running back if you want to consider him that. But it's just, is he going to get stopped at the 1 and then just not get the credit for it?
Right, for sure. And then Jalen Hurts will get an extra touchdown. We will be having a conversation about all these guys up top, but let's talk about some pass catchers. AJ Brown is the first guy for sure. Dallas Goedert with his Q tag and Devontae Smith both have Q tags. Jahan Dotson is actually in the comeback game here against his former team that drafted him when he came out of Penn State. So that should be really interesting too.
It's like the most anticlimactic revenge game I've ever heard of. Usually you don't see in division trades, and usually when your team willing to trade away an asset to another team in your division to you get them, you're usually either the winner or you just know they're not getting something. Obviously, he's had a couple of deep balls to move the chains over the last couple of weeks, but he's been an absolute dud.
2.1.
2.1. We actually had some shares of him as a default wide receiver 2 with Washington, but as soon as he went to Philly, we said no more. We didn't have a single share of him. We made sure, even if we accidentally auto drafted a player, it was not this guy. On top of it being in an offense where he already was going into Devontae Smith and Saquon and AJ Brown, it's just he's not very good, and he just needed to by default inherit opportunities. And this wasn't going to be. This was the worst place he could have ended up.
Right.
And
absolutely.
I don't really know how he salvages it from this point, unless he just has a minimum price year where he goes to a Carolina and just all of a sudden has a similar opportunity that he did in Washington.
Yeah, it's very interesting because when he came out, everybody was super excited about him. He is a first round pick in 2019, I want to say. I think it was 2019 or 2020, one of the two. But yeah, he has not panned out, but he is coming back to play his old team. So we'll see if that matters or not. AJ Brown will be the guy that we have to get a lot of. He's been really good in games that he's played this year, 18.4 fantasy points per game. Early in the year, he got the 3 touchdowns. I think we're probably due for the law of averages to catch up because he had missed 3 touchdowns in a row. So hopefully he'll get a touchdown in this game.
He had a streak going that we were kind of riding, which was basically in every game that he has played this year, he either went for 100 or he scored or both with Jalen Hurts at the helm. But then he had a couple dud weeks. Lo and behold, both of those games, they were essentially ahead the entire game and low volume. Obviously, he went 5 for 84 against Cincinnati, and then Devontae Smith was the guy that week, which sometimes it's hard to predict those guys. And then Jacksonville, even though it does say 28-23, they were up 22-0.
Yeah,
deep into the third quarter. And then also with Dallas, I know 5 for 109 is impressive, but guess what? It could have been even more if they were even any kind of closer. So this is one of those please be close. And please, Philly, just stop with the tush, push in for a second, and just give him the ball. Last year against Washington, I know it is a different regime, and they are much better this year. 8 for 30 with 2 scores, and 9 for 175 and 2 scores in the 2 games against the Commanders last year. That is an equivalent or an average of 38 fantasy points a game from a DraftKings perspective. There's a reason that both of us liked him so much in this spot, and we don't see any different, especially if Devontae Smith is either banged up or doesn't play.
Right, for sure.
We're still waiting on that. I'm assuming he will play, but he was kind of limited this past week in Dallas. Yeah, AJ Brown is kind of where I want to start my lineups this week.
Agreed. Devontae Smith with the Q tag. I think he'll play. I expect him to play, but if he doesn't play, that even makes me more comfortable with AJ Brown, of course. And then also hopefully opens up something because, as you can tell, the Eagles are very high priced commodities to this week, which makes our lines very Washington heavy, even knowing I think we're both going to pick the Eagles.
Right.
So,
and Devontae Smith is somebody that we talked about in best ball a lot, that we were taking over AJ Brown because he actually had outscored him the second half of the season last year. But that was also without Saquon. That was also, him not being banged up.
Right.
He's missed a game due to a concussion. He's also, been kind of hampered. They've also played from ahead a ton. So he's been a lot more high load this year than he has last year. But also, the bulk of his production last year came in the second half of the season. We're just getting into that. So we'll see how it kind of goes forward. But from this game perspective, that AJ Brown is the guy that I want to get to today.
Fair enough. Dallas Goedert and then Johnny Wilson are the only two left on here. Johnny Wilson is just a flyer. Dallas Goedert with his Q tag is interesting. If he does play and Devontae Smith misses, then you can probably get in this range with him.
Well, two quick things I do want to point out. Dallas Goedert, he made a return this past week. Very modest production, but he did score.
Right.
The thing is, he's been limited this week due to an ankle injury, not the hamstring. So it is worth monitoring because it is a completely different injury, how we want to go. But also, even with him coming back, Grant Calcaterra still played 62% of the snaps. He only had one target, didn't catch his pass, but he has been priced all the way down to 1,000.
Yes.
So if Dallas Goedert is limited or even missing at all, he is an absolute lock because 3 of the games that he did play in Goddard's absence, one was when he left, and then 2 of them when he didn't play. He smashed value based on his main price.
Right.
And being 1,000, that would be one of my locks if he does miss.
Completely agree with that, especially because I want to get up to 4 of the most expensive guys on the slate. But yeah, so let's talk about these defenses. I don't really know that there's a lot to say except for, they're just probably mid-price. They're mid-price defenses that are just okay plays, and I don't see them because I only have one team highlighted. All right.
You're also on the captain prices too. That's probably a little helpful. So, yeah, I think Philly's 44, Commanders are 36.
Yeah.
I mean, because of the high total, that's why they're kind of priced down, but both of them have statistically played well. If this is a game that you think is kind of more of a grind out rather than a shootout, I think both of them are viable, depending on who you pick. Philly actually has been really killing it since the bye week. I believe last week they had 20 points against Dallas and what was left of their offense after Dak went down, but 9 against Jacksonville, which it was even more without the salvaging that Trevor Lawrence did with a couple of rushing touchdowns. 15 points against the Giants. So Washington, if they kind of aren't really kind of grooving like they have been, this is a spot where Philly, that's an interesting thing. I mean, them being a 3.5 point favorite is kind of telling to me that I'm honestly surprised that the media or the success of Washington didn't drive this into being a 1 to 2 point
like a pick 'em,
and then being 3.5. That just kind of makes it seem like, oh, they're thinking Philly is this is where they kind of show their muscle a little bit. So them being 4,400 is a pretty interesting spot to me.
Yeah, and then both of the kickers are viable every single week because kickers have been absolutely killing it this year. Pick a side because guess what? Doesn't matter if you pick the right team that you think is going to win. Doesn't always work that way. Ask Cam about Greg Joseph and Brandon Aubrey.
So. Yeah, that sucked.
Yeah,
but it is worth noting Austin Seibert. He was a top 3 kicker, but he has been dealing with an injury he missed last week. Zay Gonzalez was in his spot. There is no word yet, but both of them are the same price. So if you we don't pick kickers based on names for the most part. We just do based on opportunity. So if you want Washington kicker, it's 4,800.
Yeah.
Just be on the lookout for the out tag if Seibert's out, or if he's not going to be out, then play Seibert. There shouldn't be much of an issue.
Yep. But let's talk about some game theory. Let's hear your game script for this game.
So I'm actually expecting this game as an under. I'm expecting more of a slugfest, kind of just grind it out, grind the clock out. Kind of Philly in this win streak has really kind of controlled the ball for those games. I believe they've been at least 34 minutes of time possession, which has been impressive to say the least. So, and on top of that, it's not like they're doing big plays and
right.
It's long sustained drives, ugly winning football, and then just kind of taking over namely the Cincinnati game where it was back and forth and close, but then they really started kind of running away with it and then just kind of pounced at the very end and kind of shut the door on them. So I'm picking Philly to win 24-17. I think Jaden Daniels against this defense will probably show some growing pains and maybe he'll salvage it with some rushing upside. But I don't expect this to be a shootout like we saw last year where both games were, 34-31 and
right.
38-31 kind of games. I think this will be a lower scoring one.
Gotcha. Well, I'm not that far from you. I'm at 24-21 for Philly. I just feel like Philly's the big brother. But I think it's getting closer, obviously. But they are the big brother. So I think they squeak this game out. They're at home, but I'm truly not confident if I get the best Washington and I get the best Philly team on the field this week. I'm not confident that Philly is actually the better team at the end of the day. I think that we could see a case where Washington, it's a passing of the guard, and Washington ends up being the better team on the field. It's just you have to get the best of both teams, and Washington has had a loss last week against Pittsburgh. They've played close games against the Giants, Chicago. They smacked Carolina, but after that, it was Giants, Chicago, both within 5 points.
Really the only comparable thing is just Washington has. The last 2 seasons, they actually were swept both times against the Giants,
right,
despite the Giants being bad last year. And then they kind of still struggled this year. They, had 7 field goals and 1 on a game winner, but they, Giants are one of the worst teams, and
yes,
you kind of barely held on. And then this past week, or 2 weeks ago, rather, they struggled against the Giants, and, they won a grinded out game, but it was close. Well, Philly took it to it, and it wasn't even close from the start. In a revenge spot for Saquon. So that's kind of the one comparison that you can have is like the Washington's still kind of getting there, whereas Philly's like the teams that they're supposed to be, they're starting to since this
dominate and
start to dominate.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing I wanted to put was Jalen Hurts has 8 rushing touchdowns, like we talked about, in 4 weeks. So this could be a situation where if Barkley doesn't score and he lands between the 3-yard line and the end zone, that's it. Jalen Hurts is getting the touchdown. And unfortunately, that hurts Barkley, in my personal opinion. A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, Jalen Hurts will probably be in most of my lines, and then just trying to get to the cheap options after that.
Right.
Your must play.
My must play, Sir A.J. Brown. Yeah. I think this is a great spot for him, even though Washington's been good against receivers of the pass game in general compared to last year.
Right.
I just think that he's just primetime AJ. He's different. That's kind of what you wrote on this spreadsheet, and it's true. Kind of similar to what we were talking about with Jamar Chase last week. It's just he really thrives in big moments and big spots, and this is for first place in the division, and I expect them to ride their best players to win and protect home field.
Completely agree. He would have been my pick, but I did put 2 players. I put Terry McLaurin and Jalen Hurts. Terry McLaurin has just been so consistent that at his price, if he does get that 18 points, I'm not probably going to win a tournament with that. But, 18 points is really solid. And he basically has to just outscore Saquon at that point. Jalen Hurts, though, is my other guy that I think has to be in your lines, especially if you're playing AJ. I think Jalen Hurts has to be there.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I'm not playing AJ Brown without Jalen Hurts.
Right.
And then also with Terry McLaurin, I think I'm in a little different boat than you, but I completely agree with the sentiment of it's AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts, and then you pick Saquon or Terry McLaurin on how you're building the rest of your line,
right?
Because you can't fit all 4. It's not possible unless you're just going to be double gross.
Yes.
So that's kind of how you're seeing it. I kind of side a little differently, but I understand the premise because it's one or the other, and that's how you're going to build. So it'll be interesting when we do our first looks, what you end up doing with a Terry in your line.
And then fades, I see Austin Eckler on here. We talked about why a little bit.
Yeah. And again, even if Brian Robinson is out, this is a team where they're number 1 in the NFL against running backs in terms of touchdowns scored. They're top 5 in basically multiple categories against running backs, run game, points scored, all that. I just don't see Austin Eckler having the punch-in touchdown. If he scores the 1-yard touchdown, sue me, is what it is.
Yeah.
But I just don't expect him to have the upside compared to others. If Brian Robinson, that's an easy don't click on him if he does play. But if he's out, I think more people will flock to Eckler, and I still want to be just completely off him.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm actually going to fade Saquon Barkley, which is the craziest probably thing I'm ever going to say on the show, because that is super scary. But the thing is, Saquon has had those duds. And if this week is that dud game and he gets less than 10 points, I mean, you're absolutely going to have to be off of him to make any money, basically.
Right.
Because he's probably going to be a 75% guy this week.
I don't know, actually.
Let me check the let me see.
And again, RotoWire sometimes with their percentages are kind of gross. Basically, it's Jalen Hurts is heavily what people are going with, but
55
here it says 55.
Okay.
I also don't expect AJ Brown to be 44. If he is, then we're going to have massive leverage on the field because he will be at minimum all 3, but probably a captain in 1, 2, even maybe 2 of those lines.
Agreed.
But yeah, so yeah, and
55
Austin
for-
Siebert or Washington kicker is not going to be 33%. So yeah, RotoWire not great with ownership projections on captain slates, but I would probably expect Saquon to be somewhere around 65-ish,
Okay.
maybe 60, because of the fact that he is essentially the same price as Jaden Daniels. And since you can't fit Jaden Daniels, Jalen, and Saquon, you have to pick two of the three. And so I think Jaden and Saquon are going to split ownership enough to where, you know, they'll probably be close enough to
Okay.
where it's like 55 to 65, both of them in that range.
Okay, fair. So still, if I fade him, that's a lot of lines that are going to be duds.
Essentially, what I'm predicting is that usually we do 3 lines on a showdown slate.
Yeah.
If we do 2 Saquon, or if I'm definitely going to be doing it. I don't know if you will do an outright fade, but I think I will be over the field to Saquon at 67%. Based on this slate and who else is afford up top.
I'm not scared to fade anybody, believe me.
Mm-hmm.
But
no, I know.
Let's
more often than not, fading the chalk works out.
Yeah,
but I just don't know if he'll be the chalk on this slate based on pricing and who else is warranted. I mean, a lot of people, I think Terry McLaurin being $1,600 cheaper and being more consistent. I just think that I think obviously Terry McLaurin is going to be probably about 40 to 42.
Yeah,
but
less than 50 in my opinion. It's
definitely going to be less than Saquon, but that's a good leverage point if you wanted to be different for sure.
All right, let's look at your line. Let's go. You go first this time.
All right, I'm going to go AJ Brown at captain.
Okay.
And then I'm also going to put the 2 up top, so Saquon as well and Jalen Hurts.
Big Philly stacks.
Yep. And we didn't talk about tournament plays, but they're going to both be in this line. So,
okay.
Zach Ertz.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so Cam's tournament play was Zach Ertz, and mine was Noah Brown.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that's the other guy.
Yeah. So and it's basically off the premise of Zach Ertz. If you want the small narrative, former team that he's facing, he's only actually faced them once since he's been gone 4 years now. But he's only faced them once. Well, it's there. He's been consistent, 5,600. I don't think that's enough. Noah Brown has at least started to get the volume. So as long as his snap count stays close to 80 to 90%, I feel good about that price point. And that leaves just enough for guy I mentioned earlier, Grant Calcaterra. Even if Goddard does play, it was encouraging to see that he was on the field a ton. I'm looking for somebody to get a couple points. And I think it's a week where you have to go all the way down and then try to afford as many of these studs as you can. Obviously, if you go the McLaurin route as your 4th guy, you won't have to go all the way down there, but it's still kind of the premise holds true to me in that regard.
Fair enough. We will kind of stay in a similar boat on this one. For my first look, I'm going to take these 4 out though, because those are not in my line. None of those guys are in my line because I'm going to do the crazy. Well, there we go. 4 up top route. I'm going to have $4,600 left over. I'm going to go get Zacchaeus because I think he has the highest of the Washington receivers. I do have Jaden Daniels, so it's okay to have both of the receivers in this line. And then my other guy was still truly deciding on this last guy. This last guy in is obviously very interesting, but Grant Calcaterra is option. Luke McCaffrey's an option, and De'Ami Brown's an option, but I do not want to play 2 of the 3 with Zacchaeus in this line. So I will be going Grant Calcaterra, just like you, at $1,000, $600 left. I think yours was $600 left over too.
Mm-hmm.
So leaving some money on the table for the variance and a less dupe line. But I really like this line, and it gives me 2 players for Jalen Hurts and gives me 2 players for Jaden Daniels, and hopefully they throw the ball up.
Right, and then also for what it's worth, if you wanted to, you had the money to flip AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, obviously, he's been scoring 30 points in 3 straight games.
Right.
So if you think that he has the upside and it's not a multi-touchdown game for AJ Brown, you can fit it, but it is going to be higher duped in that regard. So that's why I like AJ Brown a little bit more.
I'm looking for primetime AJ this week.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm betting on is primetime AJ. So
yeah, honestly, I don't know other than Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown who I want at captain. If I do 3 lines, I think I'm going to do 2 with one of those guys and 1 with the other. I don't know if you're in a similar boat.
I want to play 2 AJ Brown captain lines.
Mm-hmm.
And then
that third,
probably Jalen is who I side with, but at the same time, I can save some money in other places. If I did go with like a Terry McLaurin and got his, say, 16, I get 24 out of him. I wouldn't hate that, but it's like, the upside isn't necessarily there. So maybe it's just worth just going straight up to Jalen Hurts and getting his like 30-point upside.
Now, real quick, just as a quick look, don't even have to clear it. Take out the final two, and I want to put in Ben Sinnott. Just because he's the highest projected value, just give me a catch and I'll be happy. I just want to see what else we can afford if we were able to do that, because you do get a little bit more.
That's the defense.
That's Philly defense. So
or Jahan Dotson.
That's
unfortunately we didn't get up to 4,800,
right?
Because Terry McLaurin is in there. But if you were going to say, because you did the middle, basically, I did the you did you did I did the high and low. You did the middle with Noah Brown and Zach Ertz. But if we wanted to force a kicker, say we want to get there, 4,400 for two players. What is 62 gonna do for us? 2,600.
I think that's enough for.
You could go with either of the receivers. How about this? We'll go with Zach Ertz, because he'll give you 3,000 to get Zacchaeus.
I will say that if you are going to play, or in the scenario that Brian Robinson Jr. is out, Jeremy McNichols has been at least 30% of the snaps in both the games that he's missed.
Mm-hmm.
He actually was close to 40% 2 weeks ago. It is not a great matchup, but him being only 2,800, that's another value spot that
for sure.
If we play three lines, hypothetically he's out, he probably will be making one of those lines.
It's so weird that I'm picking Philly, but a lot of my lines that I'll be making is going to be like a 4-2 or a 3-3 towards Washington, because of just the value that they give you. You can't pay up for all these guys. Like, I can't pay up for Devontae Smith, Saquon, Goddard, AJ Brown, and Jalen Hurts, all the guys that I really want.
Well, I will say that we are on different sides of the spread.
Yes.
I picked Philly to cover by 7. You pick Washington to lose by 3, which would be just covering. I don't think that. I'm assuming that that's not going to make your top or your 5 of the week.
No.
But it is worth noting, and that's probably a little bit why subconsciously you're leaning towards 4-2 or 3-3 builds.
Yeah. I will say also, y'all heard it here. I'm not going to put that on my thing, so I will not be changing, unlike some people from other sites. But yeah,
I haven't looked at, obviously their picks haven't been released, so I don't know what their updated records are, but also they killed it with whatever the first look picks are this week, so I couldn't say anything because my picks were not close to theirs.
Well, we didn't do that bad. I think we're still above 500. So,
but week. I will say this is probably my worst year doing picks. I know, like, that is saying something, but I got 10 years of spreadsheets to back it up on. Typically, I'm close to 70%.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a story for.
We've done it in the past. I mean, we've always been up there pretty good, at least 66% on every week.
Yeah, and then you've always been strong with the spread picks, which that's showing you're about 65% so far this year with our top 5 of the week.
So if you just play the money line, play the spread, you'd be winning money, guys.
Right.
But we appreciate y'all hanging out with us. We've actually done great on this video every week with these Thursday night videos. We really appreciate y'all checking them out, subscribing, liking, and commenting on these videos. They've actually been probably the thing that gets us the most headway each week, which is really cool to see.
Right. Yeah, I think it's just a good timing. Everybody loves playing the Showdown. It's the first game of the week, and on top of that, when it's a fun game, it shows even more. I mean, I don't remember the game top of my head, but a couple weeks ago it was a dud that wasn't really a fun one. Didn't really get a ton of views. I think it was Denver and New Orleans. But then after, since then, it was like really exciting games, and that's why
we got Halloween. Houston and the Jets. That was a fun game. Mm-hmm. And then you got this last week, you got Jamar Chase's crazy game, and for that game,
you had a Tampa Bay Atlanta.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, all that fun stuff. And then also it helps when we actually perform well.
Well, we've killed Showdown slates.
Yeah,
we absolutely killed Showdown slates this year.
We did well last night. Ended up cashing despite it being a ugly game. It was not a fun game to watch from an aesthetic, but at least we ended up doing well and being the Puka call and contrarian to most people that were going Cup, which Cup did well, just as fine. But yeah, all that fun stuff. But like Kim said, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Please let us know what's your fades, what's your props of the week.
Yeah. Shoot, what am I doing?
Yeah, because we are on a win streak now since both of us hit it this past week. I'm going to start off first just to get before we can get out of here. I'm going to ride the hot hand, both of our favorite captain play. guy must play on the slate. AJ Brown as a boost of 1.11x for a touchdown in this slate. He had 4 touchdowns in 2 games against the Commanders last year. It is not as great of a matchup, but him being a demon, him being a pepper, that's something that really stuck out on a slate that didn't really have a lot that stood out to us from just an even perspective.
For sure. And then I'm going to go to receptions. Terry McLaurin at 4.5 is where I'm going to look at. He's been consistently getting this in the last 5 weeks. So I'm comfortable doing this. I actually didn't love any of the props this week, so that's another thing. That's why Cam also took a boost, because you can kind of get away with that a little bit on these picks and I like the AJ Brown pick. I really do. Terry McLaurin's the most comfortable I felt because of the fact that he's been doing this. I think they're going to have to throw the ball, and I think he'll be the receiver.
And what I will say is that usually target props and fantasy score props come out the day before showdown slates or on Fridays after our main look for props and whatnot. So those are some of my favorites to do, because usually yardage ones or receptions ones are juiced to the start of the week because they show up on Monday. Whereas as soon as fantasy scores come out or targets come out, I know what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And you're catching it before the juice even happens. So just keep an eye on those. And obviously, if we see some that stick out, we're going to be playing some, and you'll have to be tuned into the Discord for that if you want to catch some of those.
Yeah. But those are our 2 plays of the week. Let me stop sharing again. But we appreciate y'all hanging out with us, like we said. And please comment anything y'all think may help us even to improve the show. There's going to be a lot of things we're going to be changing as the season after the season, but we're not there yet, including fixing the wall and doing some other things. So those will be improvements, but there's a lot of things we it's our first year. We have a lot of things we need to work on, and we're getting better.
It's not a perfect product, and it never will be. And that's the beauty of it, is just kind of striving and going towards something that, we're chasing something that's never going to be reached. And so on top of that, we can just keep on improving each and every episode, each and every podcast, show, whatever you want to call it, live stream. And then there's also going to be future episodes of games and interactive stuff. And then also interviews is something that we were really going to try to hit the head on this offseason, reaching out to people. So all those kinds of things, dynamics, we're going to keep on getting better. And we hope you keep on growing as a community as we do so.
Yep, we appreciate it, and we'll see you all next time.